Okay. Let's do it. Let's bring in Rob Vanstone. Let's inject some intelligence into the conversation here. Hey, good morning, RV. How are you?
Good, thanks, Rod. How you doing?
Good. I'm fascinated to learn your take on whether you think the CFL should be eligible for COVID relief from Ottawa.
I'm aware of it, obviously, given what I do for a living and the fact I've been following this team in this league for 50 years. There's a deep-seated interest in the CFL, so I'd like to see it happen. Will they get $150 million? I don't think it's a matter of Randy Ambrosie approaching the league and saying we need this, and Randy Ambrosie approaching the federal government and saying we need this, and they're going to say okay. I mean, obviously there would need to be some bartering and some dickering, but when I look at it, I don't see many things that allow us to celebrate Canadian as the Canadian Football League as much as the Grey Cup. And one of the issues I think that is going to arise that although it's a league that goes from coast to coast and ideally into the Maritimes as well, is this a regional issue? The fan base is a lot more ardent in Saskatchewan and Winnipeg. I think in Western Canada at large, with the possible exception of BC, than it is in the more populated areas where the population density is greater. Ontario, there's 3 teams. Most had its issues. So is the interest passionate enough across the board for the CFL to be able to sell this, for the government to be able to sell it? But I just keep looking at what happens every November when there's a Grey Cup and how Canadian football in Canada is celebrated. And I think that's an entity that needs to be preserved. You really wonder where this might go if this is a protracted break or protracted hiatus. If there's no season, there's already some trouble spots in the CFL. If those go away, who you might be talking about are scaled down, reduced league, and is that what anybody wants to see?
You know, it would be hard for the CFL to come back for sure if there was no season. There's no doubt. And by the way, mark it down, fellas. Rob Vanstone, yes, for CFL getting relief from Ottawa. I am as well, Rob. Shocking. I'm actually surprised that any CFL fans would be against it. But I'm not arguing with them. I mean, obviously, they have their own issues and their own reasons. I just want to welcome some of our viewers. Brandon Atkinson writes in, says, good afternoon from Toronto. Go Argos. And I'll tell you what, we're getting more and more viewers from that GTA. We know there's CFL fans down there, Rob, but not everybody is as proud of it as Brandon Atkinson, which leads me to my second point. Argos linebacker Nakas Onyeka putting on Twitter this morning, why do Canadians hate the CFL? I'm just asking the question. You know where he's coming from. You don't. I don't. Darren doesn't. But nobody watching the show hates the CFL. But why do we always have to be battling for legitimacy? I mean, I've given up. I mean, we love it. We're going to talk about it. But why they hate in this country?
I've never detected hate, but I generally travel in circles and talk to people who are passionate about the CFL. I think it's just tilted that way, but I've spent a lot of time in Toronto in my life. My wife's family is from there, and the indifference, I'm not sure it's a hatred, but I think that might be a strong word, but I think there's an indifference to it. And again, that makes it a tougher sell when you're talking about a federal government. If it was the Rough Riders going to the provincial government, and I think it'd be a much easier case. This is obviously under a different party, but this is a provincial government that's bailed riders before and forgave a $2.8 million loan guarantee once upon a time. So and helped to build the stadium, as did the civic level of government. So if this was Rough Riders dealing with the forms of government that are in greatest proximity to them, I think it'd be a lot easier sell. But when you're looking at a greater breadth, that's the problem. I think the problem out east is I'll never forget 1989 Grey Cup. The game, we were looking for somewhere to eat, and we ended up hailing a cab, and the cab driver had no idea the Grey Cup was in Toronto. And the big football game he was interested in that day was the Buffalo Bills game, and that's an opponent the CFL has had to fight, and that's the major market in Canada. So that's, I think, where the issue lies. There's going to be a lot of sympathy for this, I think, in Western Canada, especially the prairies. But can you sell it out east? And I go back to, remember a few years ago when the government had the short bailout and how quickly that was rescinded. I think you're dealing with different issues here. You don't have the, okay, why is the government giving money to billionaire owners and millionaire players? There are some players in the Canadian Football League who are very well off. There's a lot of players in the Canadian Football League who make less money than the average fan, and they're smaller enterprises, and very few of them are virtual mints where they can just print money, unlike the NFL and unlike some so-called major professional sports. It's just the dynamics region to make this a tougher deal. And as you mentioned earlier, what can of worms do you open then? What about the Canadian Hockey League, which is by and large Canadian-based teams? You're talking roughly 60 junior hockey teams. Then there's the SJHL, then there's the MJHL, then there's the AJHL, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. What about the Western Canadian Baseball League? It goes, this is the first biggie that they have to deal with as far as a national sports enterprise. But once you do that, the lineup is going to be endless as far as sports federations looking to get money and some to sustain themselves with the assistance of the federal government as well. And that's a can of worms they've got to be wary of.
The comments are just going wild. Joe in Long Island, New York, Joe Lazito writes in and says, hate might be better because at least it shows emotion. I'd rather be hated than nobody know who I am. You know what I mean? As a league, you know what I mean? It's better than apathy. And by the way, the term hate was the word used by the Argos linebacker, Nakas Onyaka. It was his term. Okay. I don't know what's bad. I've given up running around defending this league. There's a lot of NHL guys that don't even think about it. They snicker at the money, and it's like, well, I tell you what, bud, you get cut and go to the American Hockey League, you'll be making the same amount as these CFL players. So just be careful what you're saying. But overall, I just don't spend a lot of time on it. The real sad thing is, though, Rob, because you know that I read the LP every day, specifically your columns, you've kind of had to go from West Division favorites or Grey Cup favorites to will there be a season, or talking about the past, and that sucks.
Especially with the Grey Cup in Regina this year, and everything was lining up so well for the Rough Riders. Coming off a first place season, I think Jeremy O'Day had a really good run as far as retaining the key free agents. You've got this franchise quarterback, this charismatic presence, who I think has only scratched the surface of what he can do, not only as a player, but as a presence. And the way the Grey Cup is still scheduled for November 22nd in Regina. So it was really shaping up well for the Saskatchewan Rough Riders. And it's still May if they could start a season in September. But I'm becoming very skeptical. Once you look at what's happening in Alberta, for example, where they've declared any large gatherings off limits right through the summer, how do you even hold a training camp in preparation for a season? How do you practice given some of the numerical restrictions that are in place and are very unlikely to be relaxed to the extent that people are going to be able to gather in the numbers that are necessary for the CFL to make some money? And even if the all clear is given, do people have the wherewithal to spend the kind of money for tickets that they did before the pandemic hit? And are people going to be pretty cautious about sitting next to or close to an absolute stranger for 3.5 hours? There's just so many dynamics to consider. It's really a reach to think that there's a season. And if I am wrong, please remind me that I am, and I'll celebrate with you.
Gord Archibald writes in and says, in the GTA, it's not even indifference. It's more like no awareness whatsoever of the CFL. Indifference implies some level of awareness. I say BS, because TSN airs 12 hours of CFL football for 6 months weekly. Canada's sports leader. So don't tell me people in Toronto aren't aware of the CFL. That's bunk. Not on you, Gord, but I'm just calling out the people of Toronto to say that you don't even know that it's going on. What, you don't have cable television? That just ticks me off. Travis Rosebrook, one of our viewers, says, I think the biggest question that needs to be asked is, will the CFL fold without the $150 million? An even bigger question in Rider Nation is, what happens with New Mosaic if the CFL goes under? So it's a good point. Those other amateur leagues, the AHL, the MJ, Dub, they will survive. The CFL might not. And that's the sell job that the commissioner has to do on Trudeau, which, by the way, is a CFL fan. He's gone to Red Blacks games. He's gone to Alouettes games. He practiced with the Rough Riders badly But he did practice with the Rough Riders, mind you, on Parliament Hill. RV, anything else before we let you go? I should say this. You've taken this opportunity, man, to do what everybody should do. You've been exercising for how many straight days? You've lost weight. Look, I'm jealous. The sun's shining through your window. The birds are singing. I mean, you've taken this the way that people should be taking it.
Well, I think this will be day 54. And, so I'm getting close to the Joe DiMaggio number, which I never thought I would get to. I thought I'd be more like hitting an Argina Salazar consecutive games hitting streak, and then go for a pizza. But yeah, I had a pretty life-changing day on February 26th. Well, first, this is a long story, but I'll try and make it abbreviated. December 11th, my mom died, and I went on a 2-month eating binge, just ridiculous and irresponsible and unceasing. And on February 26th, I sat down with my doctor, and he said, you've got type 2 diabetes. And so we reach a juncture where I really got to do something about this. My dad died at 61 years of age. I'm 56. I've got to do something about this, and I've never had a better motivator. Fear's a good one. And so that's pretty much what kicked in. And I haven't drank anything except water since February 26th. And my dear wife, Christula, has done amazing things with the diet to help out. And that's what happened. There's been some awful things that have happened: mom dying, diabetes, the pandemic, etc. But I'm glad I can have something to focus on that's a lot more productive and better for me. But I really didn't have a choice. If I'd been left to my own devices, and if that diagnosis hadn't come, you'd probably need a wider screen to accommodate me right now. So I don't want people to go down the road I went down, where you just have no choice. You gotta prick your finger every 2 days. That's no fun. It's absolutely awful. And so I do that for the rest of my life, and I want the rest of my life to extend at least to the next football season. So there's no choice. That's a long explanation, but that's pretty much
it was just right. It was just right, as a matter of fact, RV, and you're being a leader in this time. I'm proud of you. I will let you roll.
Thanks, Rod.
Get to your next award-winning column, which I can't wait to read, and stay safe, my friend.
You too, Rod. Take care. Thanks so much for having me, and all the best to everyone.
Thank you.
Safe.
A real treasure, Rob Vanstone, joining us from his palatial South Regina estate.
You're watching Rod Pedersen On Demand. For more of The Rod Pedersen Show, visit rodpedersen.com or follow Rod Pedersen on social media.